Hi and welcome to another chapter of Talk Books. Today I'm going to talk about somebody that was probably even more in the shadows of Darwin than Wallace was. Everybody knows about Wallace and the fact that he was also played a massive part in evolution. But this guy, whilst he was a friend of Wallace's and actually travelled extensively with Wallace in the Amazon, he is sort of not really that well known, apart from if you've heard the words Batesian mimicry. He was somebody that came up with mimicry, but particularly Batesian mimicry. There are various sort of aspects to mimicry, and Batesian mimicry is where a animal takes on the form of another animal as part of protection. So for camouflage or protection, an example in this country would be something like the hornet clearwing moth that clearly looks like a hornet, and that's to sort of give it some type of protection, or the hoverflies elsewhere. So I want to talk about, he's done a few books, but this one is actually the one that sort of put him on the map. This is the Mattress on the River Amazons, and he travelled extensively through the Amazons, first of all with Wallace, but then Wallace actually left and Bates stayed there and continued to do his exploration of those rivers. And it was at that point that he started becoming not just a collector, because a lot of the people in those days used to collect and they used to send them back for, actually a lot of them sent them back for selling in this country so that they could fund their expeditions. He became sort of, not infatuated, but certainly interested in butterflies. And it was butterflies that first sort of gave him that spark of, mimicry, and how one butterfly that potentially wasn't poisonous was mimicking another one that was, in order to protect itself from predators. So this is two things. Number one, it is great insight into mimicry, into evolution, and into sort of the mindset of the scientists at that point. But it's also a travel log. It does sort of map out his travels along various parts of the Amazon. So it gives you a good sort of geographical overview as well, and it's really worth reading. Now, clearly it was written a long time ago, so a lot of it, well, it is written in Old English, so some of it might be a bit hard going, but stick with it because it is a really good read, and it gives you a foundation for both what came after it with Charles Darwin and Wallace's evolutionary theories, but also into sort of naturalists of the time and what they would go through, and how they would go about sample collecting, identification of various species. He has quite a few butterfly species named after him, as well as some other species. So it's a really good insight into that time, and I can sort of recommend it as a really good read. And what I wanted to couple this one with was The Butterfly Hunter, which is actually about Walter Bates's life, written by Anthony Crawford, and it sort of splits into three. It talks about his beginnings, so when he was a child and how he got into wildlife and how he got interested in wildlife and science. Then it takes you through, pretty much this book, it takes you through his travels through the Amazon, which is sort of listed as his sort of greatest moments when he was actually in the Amazon. So even though he's written a number of other books, it's definitely the Amazon piece that caught people's imagination and actually broke him into the sort of the world of science, and at that time that was quite a hard thing to do. So this one then goes on to talk about that, how he actually then became the scientist that he became, how he interacted with the scientists of his time. So again, this book really sort of interesting, but obviously you've got to bear with it because of the fact that it's written in Old English, but still don't let that put you off. This one just gives a overview of the man himself, and his travels with Wallace and the different types of scientific basically innovations that he had. So I can highly recommend them both. As usual, this one will be more accessible because it's a lot newer book, but I would read that one first and then read this. Thanks for watching. Well, I hope you enjoyed that overview of Bates. I'm going to sort of continue on a theme really, because I'm going to talk about somebody who doesn't need any introduction, clearly, and that's Darwin. And I'm going to talk particularly about Origin of the Species. It's a book that I've read numerous different versions of and numerous different editions of, because there was multiple editions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about two that are, I suppose, my favourites as in how they're presented. You'll have noticed from my books, I mean, this one, which isn't Darwin, but it's very old, but it doesn't look it, because I read my books like that, so that all the spines stay really nice and neat. So I love to get books that are either out of the ordinary or different, or put a different spin on it. So I'm going to talk about two different editions of The Origin of the Species, and I'm also going to bring that up to date with Stephen Jones's book, Almost Like a Whale. I've read a lot of Stephen Jones, and again, he's great. You know, his books are really, really good. And this particular one is actually, it's tagged The Origin of the Species Updated, and it is just that. I mean, it follows a similar type of approach, a similar context. It's got the same chapter headings: variation under domestication, natural selection. But what this does is it brings that up to date. So in the next chapter, what I'll do is I'll talk about Darwin, and then we'll talk about Steve Jones, and we'll sort of tie the two together. And I look forward to talking to you then.